Merritt has lived with cystic fibrosis his entire life. The challenges and hardship he has had to overcome just to survive gives each of us a new understanding of Paul's motto, which is never let your obstacles become your boundaries. You are going to love this interview today with Paul Merritt.
Have you ever felt like giving up, quitting, throwing in the towel? Welcome to Never Ever Give Up Hope featuring Carol Graham. She's an author, health coach, and motivational speaker. Backed into a corner multiple times in her life, Carol shares with you stories on how she overcame some of the toughest obstacles a person can go through in life, but refused to give up hope. Rather than admit defeat, an opportunity was presented, and it involves each and every one of you. Carol will feature spectacular guests who will share their messages of hope, encouragement, and their inspiration to prove why life's adversities only make you stronger. And now, welcoming the host of the show, here's Carol Graham.
To know we are abundantly more than just a diagnosis and able to go beyond the very boundaries we set upon ourselves. A call, definitely, to never, ever give up hope. That is a quote that Paul Merritt sent me when I asked him to be on Never Ever Give Up Hope. And I love the way he referred to the show in that quote. To help us understand you more, Paul, can you share some of the challenges that you have had to face your entire life?
Yes, Carol. Have mentioned I've lived with cystic fibrosis, so that's been the majority of my challenge and challenges. And so living with it, for those that may or may not know about it,
hmm
it's a genetic disease that you're born with, and you're inherited from both parents. So each parent has to have a genetic mutation for a child to have it. I have an older brother that does not have it. So I was the fortunate one of us too to have that. But uh, even though all the aspects of it, the challenges, the hardships of it, with it affecting the lungs, the digestive system, and if it's just a multi-organ system disease. There's been a lot more public um, um, there's been a lot more public like movies and just education about it lately in the last few years.
hmm
Like
hmm
like the movie 5 Feet Apart. That's based
Oh,
off of
yes.
cystic fibrosis. So that's a very big movie. There's been others before it that were just less popular, I guess. But in the last few years, Heather Kingsbury is an author. She writes a book about a kid does rodeo, that a girl does rodeo, and it's just about her and her life with CF. So there's been plenty out there that's happened, and it's just in the public eye that's kind of made awareness, or more so.
Can I just
But
interrupt you for just a moment and ask you, is it strictly genetic?
yes, yes, it is strictly
Interesting.
genetic.
Okay, okay.
Yes, yes, it affects a little over 30,000 in the U.S. It's considered, like, for so long it took to get strides in medicine and development to treat it, because it is like considered an orphan disease. So it affecting such a small amount of people, it never got money from like government funding to help research. So the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation is one of the biggest contributors to CF research, and
Hmm.
so it's taken years, starting back in 2000 with kind of the completion of the Human Genome Project, and getting the map of the human gene was like one of the first steps where we knew, with Francis Collins as being part of one of those, and he's a big advocate for CF as well. But that was kind of the first stages of going along with being able to start and find really good treatment measures. Because before then, I mean, like when I was born in '86, you was told that, well, he's not going to likely live to be a teenager, if that, 12 years old maybe. Very, very few children born with it in the early 80s and things like that. And years ago, you didn't make it to adolescence hardly because of it. So the amount of medicine that has come along just over the years for that. But from the beginning, it's been a challenge. Even then, being a kid,
Of
we had
course.
very little treatments. And my treatment was a nebulizer breathing treatment. That was like one of the main things, and I did them every day, 3 or 4 times a day. And then I took enzymes to help supplement the pancreatic issues that would come up with it. So
Oh, my
to
word.
every time I eat, when I was a baby, family would, it was kind of, there was perks to it. I will say that, because I'd have to take these enzymes anytime I'd eat anything. But as a kid, one of the fun parts of it was they'd have to get opened up because I was too small to swallow a capsule.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd get applesauce or some kind of ice cream or something before I'd get to eat a meal. So, so I always looked at it. Hey, that was an advantage, even though I
Ah,
had to deal with all this. It means I got kind of, I guess maybe spoiled with getting dessert before dinner kind of thing
a
sometimes.
good way to look at it.
Yes, yeah, but it still had its many challenges with the lungs, which are the main aspect that are affected. Causes multiple infections in the lungs,
Mm.
and so that's where the treatments, where you end up going in the hospital. With at least a minimum of 2 weeks of IV antibiotics, and it was just a standard in a daily life of a CF patient. So it was always something whenever flu season would come around, because now with all the COVID stuff, it's been like, well, now a lot of people around kind of see what I've had to deal with really my whole life, with the mask
Mm.
wearing and the concern of just general flu. I've had to worry about those things, and many times if I would
Mm-hmm.
catch
Mm-hmm.
it, you land in the hospital for a 2 week regimen of antibiotics typically. So that's just kind of the beginning of challenges that it presents. Just in the beginning, when I was a kid, it was like that, and I spent many days in the hospital, and almost got to know hospital staff and nurses just as much and as close as family.
So, what did you learn through this?
As a kid, I really, I never felt like it was a burden. I don't know why. I knew there were challenges, but I always felt like I learned so much from just honestly feeling different. Because I did. I mean, as a kid,
Mm.
at school, I went to the nurse before I went to lunch because I had to go take my medicine, and it kind of put me in a sometimes awkward feeling position of feeling so different, and what that does to when you're an adolescent and a kid.
Yes, yes.
You almost looked upon. You're like, I feel like I know I'm different, so it's almost a negative thing that's looked upon. But I learned to be able to embrace those things over time. I
Wow.
wasn't good at it at first. It was always something for a long time that I hid. Nobody. I would not talk about it. I didn't bring it up. I wasn't open about it. But over time, I learned that difference kind of really gave me an ability to show through the things I would do. Like as a kid, I loved baseball. Baseball was my life. I played little league. That was my thing. I was uh, with CF. You don't tend to get the nutrients, and you don't grow as fast. So I was a really small child, very
Mm-hmm.
small.
Mm-hmm.
But I played little league with everybody else, and I was so much smaller than everybody else. Everybody else almost looked like giants. But even though I was so small and things like that, and the sports I would play, I gained their respect because I still was able to perform as good,
Oh,
if not
great.
better than many. So
Mm.
I learned to embrace those things, those challenges through going along, and not letting my illness, my disease, prevent me from doing the best I could. And I made sure every time I went and played a baseball game, I played basketball or something like that. Like it was a love of the game thing for me. It was never well, I feel like I have to prove people wrong because I'm so small. It was just I love the game, and I think I was in many ways blessed to be able to see things differently than everybody else through that same eye, those same eyes of everybody else who didn't have to deal with those things that I did on all the time. There was a time when I was a kid during one of our tournaments at the end of the season. I ended up in the hospital and I was so upset and I was on home IVs. I told mom and dad, I said, hey, I want to play in our tournament. It's our last few games of the year. We wasn't very good. So I didn't think we'd go very far in the tournament. But to me, it was important. And
Yes.
I was at home and I had an IV in my arm because I'd get my antibiotics at home and I said I want to take out my IV and go play my game, and they let me do that. They was okay with me taking my IV out, even though they told me, hey, we do this, we have to call the nurse and they're just going to come out and you have to get poked again. Well, that's another thing of CF. When you get jabs and pokes, and it's a constant revolving or turning door of just pokes and labs and things. And I said, that's okay. I want to go play my game. I went and played the game. We didn't win, but I pitched that game even. So, and then later that night, afterwards, or maybe I think the next morning, because it was a little late. I don't remember exactly, but when nurse come out and I had to get a new IV and restart my antibiotics. But I did not want to miss that game, and so those kind of things. Though I knew to participate in that game, knew, well, a little bit of pain or something was going to come later, and so I embraced that, and I had this sense of not letting anything stop me from doing anything. So that was a big part of as I grew older and started to embrace those things more and more. And I never was real great comfortably with telling people about my illness. I didn't make it at the forefront of me.
Yes.
And because I didn't want that to be, I guess as a kid, I was like, well, I don't want that to be known. Hey, that's the kid with cystic fibrosis. Even though later on, I mean, there was many that knew about it. Like when I was in high school, many knew about it, but we was friends and all that, and nothing. It was never. I had great friends in school, and they were just they knew that, and they knew things that I didn't realize they knew, but it was never made at the forefront as I was labeled as just that kind of person, that just somebody with a disease. Because the many things I did definitely would show different, because many wouldn't believe I would be able to do some of the things I did because of me having disease. So it almost felt like I was able to inspire others by showing that. I mean, because my best friend in Little League, we was attached at the hip, me and my friend Monty, and we were best friends all them years. And he was, I think he was probably 2 foot taller than me, but we, he had my respect and I had his, because we were just that way. And he realized, and many others knew, that I wasn't going to let CF stop me from doing those things and providing an inspiration or preventing me from anything.
So you had a determination. Now, do you think that was something that your parents taught you, or were you just born with that? Like this innate determination to not necessarily succeed, I mean a determination to live, period.
Yeah. No, honestly, no, I don't think it was taught in me. I think it's been there from my beginning. And later on, I give credit then, now, and the future. I mean, I give my credit to God, because that's where I believe He gave me that ability. Now, I'm nothing special, obviously, but that determination, it was always there. It's not something I picked up, but it's also something I looked for in other places too. As cliche as it may be, a movie that you see about a scenario where a person's, get all the odds stacked against them and they overcome, with any sports movie or any like that. I looked for those inspirations too, and those kind of things. I mean, and
Yes.
inspired me. I mean, so I figured, if anything, when I would see a movie or see something like that close to it, and it's like, I see they can do it. I know I can do that. I had that determination, and I believe it's always been there. It's never something I was really just taught by any individual, but I also looked for inspiration in many places too, to draw that same inspiration from. So I could go out and try to do that same thing, to mimic that.
Well, what you feed will grow.
Yes.
And that was your attitude, and what you don't feed will die. And obviously you were feeding your faith, your determination, your belief structure, and that grew, and that has probably sustained you even more than you'll probably ever know.
I agree with that statement 100% because there are times where I'm like, there's no way I can get through this, or there's no way I can deal with another round of hospital stay, or another negative thing coming from a doctor, another thing, that just felt like it's gonna knock me down, and then that final, now I can't get back up. I did. I was able to sustain it somehow, and the only way now, all my credit goes to the Lord for that.
Well, now, many people have faced adversity, and I think, as you mentioned earlier, because of COVID, many more are facing it that possibly did not have to before. So, what can you share as some of the keys to getting over adversity in your life?
Knowing that when you get to a point to where you don't know where to go, where to look, or if you're at that point of I've had enough of giving up. There are plenty resources, and mine was always, and more so as I got older, but always looking to others to kind of help. Um, Not so much be the only support, but when you surround yourself with those that are supporting you and know what you're going through, because believe it or not, when you're in those scenarios, those people that are around you that aren't facing those but are seeing you go through them will see you as a such a hugely strong individual, and they know that you have an ability and a power beyond what most others will even ever experience. So uh, they, they see you as strong, and I think adversities that we face with COVID, because it's in such a mainstream and everybody's mind in the last 2 years, and with all the uptakes here recently, I mean, it's in my mind all the time, and I worry about that with where I'm at today. I've been fortunate enough to not get it somehow, and I've been one of those out in the field. But when you have those that are facing those, and you find yourself there with the Lord and Scripture and faith, but when hugely in faith, no matter what, if it's, I mean, faith doesn't just have to be in just in God. You have to have the faith in yourself as well. I draw a lot of faith from the Lord for it, and I pray whenever I get to those points. But I also feel that there are others around us that will carry that faith for us whenever we're that low and we feel like we can't stand and keep carrying the burdens that are on our shoulders. There's many days I've felt that way, and somehow, some way, something. And I think those are through the Lord, to where everything that we encounter and those that come around us, and everything's for a reason, because it says there's a time for everything. There's a time to reap, there's a time to sow, like Scripture says. I mean, there's timings, and those are essential, and I think they're there even though we may not see them at all. So have faith in yourself still. I know it may be small. Faith of a mustard seed would move a mountain if you just have enough of it, and it doesn't take just such a small amount of faith in yourself and God, and then others that have faith in you, and you can move whatever mountain and get across whatever boundary that you may be coming to or facing that day, and take it a little by little. Even you don't have to look for a huge gain in one day. I mean, a little bit every step. One step and a journey of 1,000 miles starts with that first step. So take it little by little, and find your faith in those things.
How did you cope when you would overhear things such as, oh, he can't do that, he's too sick, he's too weak? And I have a quote here from you in response to that I just loved, and I'd like you to address that. And that is this: the size of the fight in the dog is what gets you there. So I know you addressed this already a little bit. Expound a little bit more on that.
When I was 19 years old, just after high school, I got in the laborers union, and just got out in the work, the work world. My dad was a laborer for all his life, and I had many family members that were in unions here. And so I jumped in it, and being in such a tough industry with construction, and I was placed in many places that I probably should have put myself in, but the amount of work those kind of things and those jobs take, you're surrounded by many people that's big guys. To kind of give you an example of that question of where, oh, you're too sick, you're too ill. Well, all them years I worked construction just about, or at least 3/4 of it. I done it with about half the amount of lung function anybody else did. And I sat around, probably 50, 60% lung function. Nobody knew that, obviously, when I worked with them, but we would do these big, heavy jobs, and I done a lot of what's called refractory work, and the intensity of those jobs alone would put anybody down. The heat of the summers, it doesn't take nothing. Some of the places we are, they're hot environments. They're hard work, and I give it to everybody and anybody that does those jobs, sick or well. But I worked for a guy named Dave Goodman he was a foreman, and this individual he was a friend of my cousin's who was in a carpenter's, and they grew up together. But I worked for him, and he told me one day, he said, if I had a crew, and just half a crew, that had just as much heart as you did, he said, I would never ever need anybody else again to work with me. And that stuck with me.
Of course.
It was a comment that I greatly appreciated, and just having heart in all those tough situations that you find yourself in, whether you're ill or not. Get on your other part of the question about that with the keys. Having heart. I think having heart is a huge contributor to keeping you going. The go back to the sports reference. You see so many people and some of the best players and things like that you see. They have heart, and those that have challenges and of illness and things like that nature, you still have to have heart. And that heart and that willpower. Willpower is another one. Just, somebody's going to say, yeah, you can't do it because you're too sick. Guess what? There's miracles every day that an individual does something that there's, by all the data and statistics in the world, that says you wouldn't be able to do that. It's been done. There's tons of stories out there you can read of. Just a example for this summer, we've had the Olympics going on. Look at all those people that's going to be and doing things in the Paralympics, and the disabled people that are doing so many things that a regular individual is like, there's no way I'd be able to do that. That would kill me. I'd be on the sidelines dying. Just look at those inspirations. The heart of those individuals is immaculate. There's that, and that's just excluding faith. Just the heart alone is another huge key part of an individual, of what they can accomplish.
I like that. And as you were sharing that, I was also thinking of how the adrenaline kicks in, like in times of adversity. In those
Yes.
times of adversity, that brings a determination, I am doing this. You don't even think about the task, you just think about, I'm doing it. And
Yes.
that sounds exactly like what you are saying. You're not allowing the extenuating circumstance to prevent you, but rather to motivate you. Your determination came across. So I sincerely appreciate that. Thank you. Now, share a
Yes.
little bit about your memoir. Is it any
Sure.
different than the story that you just shared, or what's the thrust of it, or whatever you'd like to share?
Well, some of it, of what I've shared so far, is included in the memoir. It focuses a lot on the faith aspect, though. With my memoir, Lifelong Turbulence, it's it's a little more detailed. It talks about a lot of my growing ups. Starting as a kid, Dad worked construction, Mom worked just a food service job at a place locally, and it goes into details about other aspects of my life, with not just my illnesses, with things family have faced, with some of it goes into addiction issues that's come up. It goes into some of the health of my mother, who has had a hard time since she's been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis years ago. So she's faced her own adversity and still faces them now. And what's part of that story is in there, and talks just more in depth about those things. It talks a little bit about not being able to be in a drug trial that I hoped so much for, that I prayed for, but I was not able to find that, and the potential benefit from that, and also kind of the consequences of it, so to speak, of what not being able to do those things. So it goes really in depth, but a big part of it, what I want anybody to get out of, is to know, like as you mentioned before about me, my kind of motto with never let your obstacles become boundaries. There's one of my favorite in the beginning of my book, in the introduction part, where I quote, it's a quote from Helen Keller that says, "Although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of overcoming of it." And it's one of my favorites that I included in there, because it highlights so much of illnesses, of the tribulations, of the turbulence, of the adversities that we all go through. I mean, there are all so many different levels.
Right.
But knowing at the end of the book, turn that last page, knowing that there's inspiration, there's faith, and all those things that we've discussed, and in those moments where you find yourself in that don't lose hope. As your podcast is named, Never Ever Give Up Hope, and I love that name because it's so true. It is. It's a wonderful naming of such a small thing that can make such a big benefit in our lives.
Well, I thank you for that. And we are going to take a very short 30-second break. And when we come back, I want to talk about your other book. And I find this title very interesting, The Best of Disease and Simple Ways to Improve. So we'll be right back.
Carol Graham would like to show you the path from misery to miraculous triumph in her fast-paced memoir, Battered Hope. She relates her determination to succeed as someone who experienced one horrendous nightmare after another. Gang raped and left for dead, loss of a child, husband falsely imprisoned, and cancer. Nothing could break her tenacity or faith. No matter what you face, heartache, loss, suffering, or injustice, Carol will illustrate how she became a victor the same way you can. The secret is to never, ever give up hope. Order your copy at Amazon or batteredhope.blogspot.com.
Well, it has certainly been encouraging to hear someone who has been through so much have a phenomenal attitude and outlook. And that's what gives us inspiration. That's what this is all about. That's what never ever giving up hope is. It's easy not to give up hope if you don't need it. But when you are in a position where you really need to hang on to that hope, even if sometimes there's only a thread, and you are definitely someone who has done that. And I thank you for what you have shared. So tell us a little bit about your book, The Best of Disease and Simple Ways to Improve.
That book started out as not even thinking about being a book. I mean, it's relatively short, but it started out as me kind of starting up a little bit of I guess you could call it a coping mechanism, because at that point when I started writing that, I was CF has started to take away just about everything away from me, from being able to work full time. It's just being able to feel like I had a life each day other than meds and treatments. So I started just writing things, and I've always been a big advocate and love science. And I was going to school at Oakland City University, which is a Christian university here, not too far from southern Indiana, where I live at here in Evansville. But I was going to school there, but at that point, it had even taken my ability away to do that, because I had deteriorated in my lungs so bad. I was hovering around 30% lung function mark, which is what was my FEV1 about that time. So I was on oxygen full time. I was on on antibiotics more and home IVs more than I was off. So I just started writing one day, and I would read my Bible regularly, and I just kind of felt like I really did. I felt like I had a calling to tell me, hey, write this. I think I was going to, did I start writing it for a book? No. It was just, I started out a lot of, these are things in my head I think of, just put them to paper. And I started incorporating, and when I would talk about a subject in that book, about any of it, like I talk about the CRISPR DNA technology that has the ability to, with the gene editing, to that would essentially get rid of cystic fibrosis across the board. Gene editing and the CRISPR technology and
Hmm.
even some of the further, that would delete those genetic mutations or correct them rather. And some of the medications that are out now, that was part of that, one of them that was part of that drug trial I was unable to get into, was a medication that corrects that mutation at the genetic level for the patient. And the amount of increase in health and help that that medication has provided itself is astronomical. Clinic from, I'd go to IU, all the time at Indiana University Hospital, where CF clinic is. I drive 3 to 4 hours there for an appointment. And drive back home if I was lucky enough to come back home. But that's where I was going for that trial. And those medications on that I was trying to get have made huge differences in the life. And it's only because of science and things like genetic and CRISPR technology that's allowed those kind of things to happen. Now, CRISPR would essentially connect the gene on the genetic level to where you wouldn't take really a medication, but it would all be about a delivery method. But that book just talks about like things like that, and all that started out as, well, I love gene technology because of its relevance to myself. Because maybe somewhere inside me, I hoped and prayed maybe I can get cured from this and I can feel like I might live a normal life. But that book started out as just kind of a coping mechanism of putting my thoughts to paper, and with all the scripture and things that I thought that were very relevant to the topics that were in my head that I was writing down each time and each day that I started it. And I thought, well, I feel like these things can still somehow maybe help an individual out there, that it has that ability to incorporate scripture where somebody's losing faith that may have been in that same position where I was at, that was just deteriorating. There were still many that wouldn't qualify for any of the CF modulators for the medications. So for those, like I felt horrible about and for, because I was one of those as well. I didn't have the ability to start taking that thing, those medications. So there was a patient in whenever I was hospitalized for a 2 weeks stretch for another set of antibiotics one day, and I just decided to go through Christian faith and publish my book and do self-publisher. And he was up there, he was kind of struggling and talking to me, and he had found out through one of the other nurses about me publishing that book. And he's like, I heard you publish a book. And he just kind of talked to me a little bit. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, I'm going to get it. And he asked me what the name was and where he could get it. And he got it. And he thanked me for a while. And we're still friends. And he thanked me for, just having the ability just to be able to help encourage him. And I said that whenever I decided to do that book, if it helps one person, I feel like successful. I don't care if I
That's
sold
right.
0
That's
copies.
right.
I was never in it to become rich, because that's not why I done anything or wrote anything. It was because of the ability and I felt like through my thoughts and things I was going through, and anything that I could write down and somebody read and say, you know what, this inspired me to be able to keep going, or something of that nature, that made it a success for me, no matter what.
I totally can relate to that. And I remember when I wrote my memoir, I said the same thing. And, in your heart, of course, you want to be able to reach many because you have a message that you want to reach many. But also at
Yes.
the same time, you know that if you reach that one, and it's exciting when you do reach that one, and then it's more, and then it's more,
Yes.
and it
Yes.
grows. And this
You
show
feel so.
actually this show is a result of my memoir. So this is, you never know where the first step that you take is going to lead. And so I thank you for sharing that. Is there anything
Yes,
else
ma'am.
that you would like in conclusion to share?
I would like to let everyone know. I never thought ever I'd write anything. I mean, when I was a teenager, you'd be lucky to get me to read a book. I didn't read anything or care to read much about until I was probably in my mid 20s, honestly, and it just was not my thing. Other than the Bible and stuff, and even then I didn't dive deep into that and try to understand what the Lord had planned for me. I just kind of just like, well, I'm here and I'm have to deal with what I am, what I was born with. But it's not just that. These times with my memoir, those it just kind of kept me going, just writing and like you said, with the reaching one person. Yeah, you feel like you have that passion in your story of what you feel so passionate about because what you're going through and your example that you can set for others by what you're going through can help somebody else. You have that passion, and if you can't reach 1,000, 1,000,000 people, okay, no big deal. Because what did God say? He would leave the 99 to go find and get back the one, right? So um, he does that. So it's not about always the 99. It's about that one individual, because one individual can make a difference of millions of others. So
That's right.
if we focus on that one individual and not worry so much about the reaching the millions or thousands of others, not that we wouldn't if we had the chance. Yeah, we want to. If we can go speak to a crowd of 1,000,000 people and make 1,000,000 different lives better by our story and our adversity, of course we would. But that one, though, may be able to make a bigger impact on more people than what you may be able to. So that 99 and going for the one, that remembering that one individual is not left out no matter what.
Well, you just preached a short sermon there, Paul.
Well, thank you, thank you. I hope that what I've gone through, what I've wrote in my memoir, what I wrote in my first book, inspires more. If it inspires one more, then hey, that's one more on top of the other one, then that's two. So hey, there we go. We're at two.
What an
So
excellent attitude. Thank you. That's awesome. Well, it has been great hearing your story, hearing it from a perspective that possibly we got better than just reading your book. But I also want to encourage those who are listening to read your book, to read both of your books, and to support you. And I just thank you that you are a person who has never given up hope. You are the poster boy for for that. That is awesome. I appreciate you mentioning that. And to the audience, again, remember, never ever give up hope. Thank you, Paul.
thank you.
Thank you for listening to Never Ever Give Up Hope, featuring Carol Graham. Did you know that most people succeed because they are determined to? Quitting was never an option. Carol loves your comments and will respond to each one. So please subscribe and review this podcast. A rating of 5 stars would be outstanding and appreciated. Remember, if you are still here, there is always hope.